It's time to eat.
What are you hungry for?
Sit down and get ready to consume an abundance of fantasy football knowledge from Ross Tucker and John Daigle.
Feed me now. I'm starving.
On the Fantasy Feast Eatin' podcast.
Yeah, let's eat, baby. It is the Fantasy Feast Eatin' podcast. We are, of course, presented by DraftKings. I'm Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years. So no, I was never anyone that was drafted by fantasy teams. I kind of don't like that. That annoys me, by the way, that fantasy makes those guys even more popular than they already are. That's okay, though. It's a fun way for everybody to feel like they are invested in each and every game, which is great for me now as a broadcaster or just a football lover. Check me out on social media at Ross Tucker NFL. Check us out at Ross Tucker Pod. As a reminder, you can always ask our expert, John Daigle, a specific question about your squad, but you got to take advantage of one of our sponsors, and you got to email me, ross@rosstucker.com. Love those of you that check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. Just like I love those of you that go to establishtherun.com. So here's what I like in life, okay? I like entrepreneurs. I like I like small businesses, people that start small businesses that employ other people. I like people that take risk, and I like people that work their you-know-what off to make it successful. And John Daigle fits all that criteria. He and Evan Silva and Adam Levitan have done an unbelievable job to take something that was nothing, establishtherun.com, and make it the powerful beast that it is today. And you guys get a discount still, even if it's not for fantasy anymore. You just want to get all their data. It's worth it. Use the code FEAST, get the discount, establishtherun.com. His social handles at NotJDaigle. And John, you know the deal, man. We got no time to waste. We're talking Bengals, Ravens, Thursday night. What do I need to know?
An interesting one as well, since we've already seen these two high-powered offenses play each other earlier this year. Recall Joe Burrow, 392 yards, 5 touchdowns in that game. But the personnel has changed since then. It doesn't look like we're going to have T. Higgins in this contest. And the splits that have happened without T. Higgins on the field so far this year have been really incredible for Mike Gesicki in particular. Just 5.5% of the team's targets with Higgins so far this season. But without him now, a 4-game sample, 19.5%, including that 2-touchdown performance just last week. So without Higgins, Gesicki not only becomes a tight end 1, but someone you can feel confident flexing among your other running back, wide receiver options, especially since we have 4 teams on bye this week. The chess matchup I'm curious about is what the Bengals will do on the ground, because although the Ravens secondary continues to struggle, I have no issues with Joe Burrow, Gesicki, Jamar Chase, all of them getting there, probably with ease, honestly. Chase Brown shot out of a cannon, and also in his first game without Zach Moss, who's now out for the rest of the regular season on IR with a serious neck injury, Chase Brown handled 32 touches last week. So much so that not only did they not trust another back, Travion Williams was active behind him, they didn't trust another back for a single touch. They also, on Tuesday before the trade deadline, went out and got Khalil Herbert. Long term, I don't think Herbert threatens Chase Brown's workload just because of who he is. Maybe he comes in for a sprinkling of touches on the goal line down the road because he's a big-bodied back. He only has a career 3.9% target share. Really hasn't earned targets at the NFL level despite being a very good player when asked to carry the load between the tackles. But Chase Brown, it's tough because the Ravens still... The most rushing yards they've allowed to any player, running back or quarterback this year, is 52 to Nick Chubb a couple weeks ago. So it's just going to be a situation where you start Chase Brown because he's an every snap running back, but I am worried about the ceiling in this game in particular. On the other side of the ball, for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, unsurprisingly, also had success the last time these two teams played. Deontay Johnson, just like last week when it was too quick of a turnaround to really get him on the field, I'm expecting a similar thing. there will be a situation where the Ravens run into a tough run defense and they need to play more 11 personnel, and so they can then unload Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Deontay Johnson in 3 wide sets to give them just another answer to opposing defenses. But I don't think that's this game. And it not only was Zay Flowers with, once again, over 25% of the team's targets last week with Deontay Johnson on the team, but in the game, the last time these two teams played between the Bengals and Baltimore, remember, 11 catches, 190 receiving yards. So I'm expecting another huge day for Zay Flowers, especially since it does not look like the Ravens will have Isaiah Likely DNP through Wednesday so far. And if that's the case, then we can also feel confident firing up Mark Andrews, who should be back in our lives as an every down tight end.
Love it. Back in our lives. I love it. All right. What about the Giants and the Panthers? Almost forgot we got a Sunday morning game this week over in Germany between a pair of 2-7 squads.
Apologies to Germany from the Ross Tucker podcast that we're sending you the Giants and Panthers, but nonetheless, we're all going to get through this together. And what Brian Daigle, head coach for the Giants, did last week after Daniel Jones committed 2 turnovers on the team's final drive against 2 last drives against the Steelers, what Brian Daigle did is really just reel it in and made sure Daniel Jones couldn't fail. 57% of his passes were within 9 yards of the line of scrimmage. 6 of his 7 carries were designed runs just to get him on the move since, as he showed last week, he is a mobile quarterback, 54 rushing yards and a touchdown. And that type of game plan, I would imagine, cannot fail in this spot against Carolina, who even allowed, remember, the 2 weeks prior to Derek Carr, Marcus Mariota finished as the QB8 in fantasy, and Bo Nix the QB2. Nix had 4 carries. He had a rushing touchdown he finished with. Mariota rushed for 34 yards before Jaden Daniels, remember, left the field, rushed for 50 yards as well. So just the fact that Carolina has also showed they've struggled with mobile quarterbacks, I think Daniel Jones does sneak in here as a low-end QB1, fringe QB2 for those who are looking for super flex options during the bye weeks. It has been tough for Malik Neighbors, I will admit, because now in 3 games without Andrew Thomas, pretty much what you expected happened. Daniel Jones has been under pressure on 50% of his dropbacks in these 3 contests, and Malik Neighbors has struggled for it with inaccurate targets. No more than 80 receiving yards in any of his last 3 games, despite being hammered with over 30 targets in that time. I am taking this week because I still expect this offense to struggle as a whole down the road and in the fantasy playoffs. Definitely starting Malik Neighbors this week. I'm hoping he gets there with a ceiling since the Panthers, as we talked about last week, are still generating pressure at a league low rate. And then I'm looking to flip Malik Neighbors in fantasy, sell high on him coming out of this juicy matchup. On the other side, Deontay Johnson traded. Bryce Young, great to see him and Dave Canales get their win together. And what's really happened behind Deontay Johnson is that their first-round rookie, Xavier Legette, the explosive wide receiver, has stepped up. Now a 20% and 25% target share in his last 2 games from Bryce Young, and without Adam Thielen, a double-digit target share in the 5 games he's finished. He's proven he can be out there and earning targets. And it's not just that rookie. It's another rookie and their day 3 tight end, Jatavian Sanders from Texas. We now have 3 games that Tommy Tremble, the athletic blocking tight end from Notre Dame, has missed this season for Carolina. And in those 3 games, Sanders has stepped up with 23% of the team's targets and box scores of 49 yards, 61 yards, and 87 receiving yards as well. It's a good matchup for Bryce Young and the Panthers too. Obviously, we question their ceiling every week. But if you do need a tight end, a wide receiver in a pinch, both Legette and Sanders, I believe, are startable in fantasy this week.
Nice. What about the Patriots and the Bears? This is a juicy matchup in terms of the rookie quarterbacks in this one. I don't know, John. The last couple games kind of looks like Drake May is playing at least as well as Caleb Williams. Curious to get your thoughts on this one.
He's been playing awesome. And usually I fear the Bears, but we're at the time of the year where cluster injuries begin happening. And I think that's what's going on Chicago's defensive side of the ball, because they are now looking at potentially missing, and we'll have to keep up to date on the injury report. We recorded this on Wednesday morning, but it looks like Montez Sweat, all-star edge, their safety Jaquan Brisker, and then nickelback Kyler Gordon could all be out. And I think those injuries the past 3 games or the past couple of weeks are why Jaden Daniels, Kyler Murray, they combine for over 8 yards per attempt against an otherwise usually stout Bears passing defense. Not only that, but May has shown he has a higher floor than most quarterbacks, averaging over 5 carries per game now. So Drake May is someone I suggested in my waiver wire column at Establish the Run, and I'm confident starting in this game just because I believe it's all catching up to Chicago. And I know he has not popped in the box score, but it also seems like a standout wide receiver, becoming May's favorite option, is their slot wideout, Demario Douglas. He and May have only finished 2 games together this year because remember, May left early a couple weeks ago, and then in London against the Jaguars, Douglas battled the flu, ran the 5th most routes among their wide receivers, wasn't even on the field. But in the 2 games they have completed together, Douglas has seen 24% and 22% of the team's targets. Team high marks in both games. So I think that's where he still prefers to lean on when they're healthy together. Just a sneakier option for everyone out there to keep in mind as a wide receiver 3 or 4 in this contest. For the Bears, though, it is not as pretty. It has clearly been a struggle out of their bye. I would argue no adjustments made by Matt Eberflus and Shane Waldron on the offensive side of the ball, and it's been hard to get anyone there. DJ Moore did have the 100-yard, 2-touchdown performance against the Panthers earlier this year, where he finished as a top 24 wide receiver. Beyond that, though, his highest finish for fantasy is wide receiver 30. So basically a wide receiver 3 you lock in, and around that he's been unstartable because of the inaccurate targets from Caleb Williams. Not only that, but we've seen that they keep leaning on Keenan Allen in 2 wide receiver sets. I don't know if it's a Caleb Williams problem or if it's a Keenan Allen transitioning, perhaps at his age as well transitioning, but it's really been a struggle now in this second half of the year, leading the team with 17 targets in 2 games out of their bye, but roughly 80 receiving yards in that time on that volume. Whereas it looks like Caleb and Rome Odunze, their explosive rookie, top 10 pick earlier this year, do have the best rapport with one another. Odunze, 13 targets out of the bye, and this past week exploded for 100 yards, including that massive 40-yard downfield shot in the first quarter. I believe, personally, Odunze will outscore DJ Moore in fantasy for the rest of the season. He's out there in some waiver wires. He's a buy low option before the fantasy trade deadline, and that's the player I think can consistently get there. We may have even lost Cole Kmet, oddly enough, who has to be on the field because he's such an integral part of their running game. But Cole Kmet now, again, because of the coaching staff's lack of adjustments, just 1 target the past 2 weeks out of the bye. It's all inexcusable, and it's all going very poorly for a Bears offense that also looks like they just lost their starting right tackle, Darnell Wright. At the end of the game, they were on their practice squad tackle they called up on Wednesday. And Caleb Williams, just 4.5 yards per attempt under pressure this year. So it's a mess right now in Chicago. Admittedly, Ross, Rome Odunze, DeAndre Swift, really the only 2 guys you can trust in fantasy.
It's not a mess in Buffalo because those folks know how to drink delicious Labatt Blue Light like I do. Do it with your friends. Live life to the power of we. Always enjoy responsibly. Beer, Labatt USA, Buffalo, New York. They're in Indy to take on the Colts, John.
And the Bills are just an engine that you cannot stop right now. You're best just getting out of the way of that train. And that's why I worry about this game. Get ready for more retort about Anthony Richardson being under center because Shane Steichen lined it up to where Joe Flacco is now playing nightmarish pass rushes for basically the next month of the season. And that's kind of the issue, is that Joe Flacco, in being immobile, if the pocket crashes, he has to get rid of the ball quickly or he gets sacked. Whereas Anthony Richardson, at the very least, could shed tacklers and get out of those pass rushes way. Only Lamar Jackson has finished as a top 12 quarterback in fantasy against the Bills this year. And he did so not really through the air, but because he had 11.4 rushing points in that game with a rushing touchdown and over 40 rushing yards. Purely from a passing lens, Buffalo has limited opposing quarterbacks to just 6.5 yards per attempt. So this is another situation where we talked about last Sunday night, Joe Flacco really struggling under pressure. It's another situation where I don't even want to start him in Superflex leagues because I really fear the Colts passing offense struggling altogether. How you beat Buffalo is hammering the ball on the ground, and I'm hoping the Colts continue to do that. Buffalo allowing over 5 yards per carry. Jonathan Taylor in 5 completed games now, getting practically every single touch. Trey Sermon, Tyler Goodson, not used at all in those 5 games. So Jonathan Taylor, I'm definitely trusting this matchup and hoping the Colts stick around. Colts' favorite receiver continues to be Josh Downs. We saw him pop again last week, so much so that I still believe he outscores Michael Pittman the rest of the way. For the Bills and Josh Allen, it is going to be more of a touch-and-go situation because it's not only Amari Cooper, who missed last week with a wrist injury, Keon Coleman also suffered a wrist injury in that game. So they had no choice but to bring in Mac Hollins to be their second wide receiver outside of Khalil Shakir. Khalil Shakir has been incredible from the slot this year. And this matchup is soft enough for Josh Allen and a Bills offense that's just humming along that I don't perceive they'll have any issues, at least in the short term. So in 14-team leagues, if only for the opportunity, if you want to squeeze Mac Hollins in your lineups because Keon Coleman may be out, totally fine with it. But really, it's coming down to Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid, and James Cook in this game.
Let's get to the Vikings and the Jaguars. And what's cool about that game is that your value pick for the week is in the game. Presented by DraftKings. DraftKings, the crown is yours.
We talked about Sam Darnold being great for fantasy last week because of his splits against zone coverage, which Colts DC Gus Bradley runs at league-high rates. But the Jaguars are a terrific matchup just because of what this secondary is allowing for fantasy. Jacksonville has already allowed the overall QB1 for fantasy football in 3 different games this year. And the only game they didn't allow a top 12 finish was a couple weeks ago when Jordan Love, who passed for nearly 200 yards in the first half, by the way, was injured in replacing Malik Willis. It is another amazing matchup for Sam Darnold and this Vikings pass offense that is due for regression just based on the volume that they're trying to get Darnold through the air behind the scenes. So I love Darnold as my value pick on DraftKings this week.
Ooh, nice. Okay, in particular, the skill guys around him, what are you thinking?
Everyone continues to be involved, and perhaps it's another week where T.J. Hawkinson is eased in. Used closer to the line of scrimmage last week, was tackled near the goal line, nearly got in for a touchdown to save his day. But as we've seen even with the veteran receivers transitioning to different teams after trades this year, players coming back from injury, we expected him to be brought along slowly. And now it's not exactly extended rest, but at least we know that he can easily bounce back and be a full-time player in this game. So I am trusting T.J. Hawkinson as low and tight in 1, but unsurprisingly, the guy here who's going to explode is Justin Jefferson. The Jags are one of only 2 defenses playing man coverage on only 40% of their snaps. Remember, in week 1 as well, they did not change that scheme for Tyreek Hill. They still decided to play man coverage. Last week against A.J. Brown, did not change that scheme. They still wanted to man up the biggest receiver on the board. And, of course, he got injured mid-game, but he had 36 yards at that time. Justin Jefferson leads the league with 28 yards per catch against man's coverage. It's not going to go well if you want to stick just one man on him and no one over the top to help save you. So it seems like it could be a nuclear game, maybe even 200 receiving yards for Justin Jefferson in this one. The only way, in my opinion, that the Vikings passing game does not get there is that perhaps the Jaguars don't have enough firepower at this time. We saw without Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis last week, Brian Thomas coming back from injury, that they really struggled as a whole. And yes, the Eagles' defense is a different monster in their last 4 games out of their bye, but at the same time, there's just really no one who's stepping up right now behind those 2 wide receivers. They threw in their sophomore, Parker Washington, to the slot. He spiked a 19.5% target share. And once again, I'm totally fine going back to Parker Washington in a 14-team league if you just need the touches for 4 teams on bye. But beyond that, it's exactly what we expected. Evan Ingram, 10 targets, 33% target share, because that's who Trevor Lawrence trusts, especially with Christian Kirk off the field. And Travis Etienne, although he came back from injury, the struggles continued. Dropped a pass at the end of the first half that resulted in an interception. Saquon Barkley scores a 19-yard touchdown on the very next possession, and the Jaguars had no choice but to bench Etienne in the second half. And Tank Bigsby then out-touched him 8-1 the rest of the way. So Tank Bigsby, although he's not used in the passing game, I still believe he's the player to if you need a Jaguars running back, trust over ETN just based on the mess that's going on in Jacksonville right now.
Hey, so this Smirnoff contest is ending soon. I've been telling you guys about it the last couple weeks. It's WeDoGameDays.com. It ends November 15th. They're giving fans in select areas of the country a chance to win the ultimate game day experience, tickets, sideline passes, much more. Please drink responsibly. Smirnoff number 21 vodka, distilled from grain, 40% alcohol by volume. The Smirnoff Company, New York, New York. Please not share with anyone under legal drinking age. No purchase necessary. 21 plus. And 11/15/24. See rules at website for participating area and other important details. Sponsored by Diageo Americas Incorporated, New York, New York. Here's the deal. There's no I in football. It's a we thing. You experience it together. Good drinks, good folks. That's my friends at Smirnoff, the world's #1 vodka, an official vodka partner of the NFL. WeDoGameDays.com. WeDoGameDays.com. Let's get on to the Broncos and the Chiefs. And, man, pretty good game for DeAndre Hopkins. Shout out to the people that have DeAndre Hopkins on their squad.
It was polar opposite performances. Xavier Worthy, their explosive rookie, had been earning targets successfully out of the team's bye. We know rookie wide receivers grow along the stretch in the last half of the part of the season too. That's why we target them for fantasy. But -1 yards and a poor night, whereas DeAndre Hopkins, just a lot of the same Travis Kelce routes, where, like they even mentioned on the broadcast, Andy Reid told him the moment he arrived, just make sure you remember the play is never dead with Mahomes. You always keep running your routes. He will find a way. And we saw that on that deep shot that Mahomes just dropped into a bucket, which is more of shoving his arm forward. He was so under duress. And Hopkins comes down with a 30-plus yard catch, just turning his head upfield. They have a rapport that's incredible, and I'm happy for DeAndre Hopkins, who cried after the game. He was so excited because just think of his career with Davis Mills. We just left Will Levis to come to the greatest quarterback of all time. So it seems like it's going to go really well the rest of the way for both DeAndre Hopkins and Travis Kelce, who age just doesn't catch up with. We saw him just hammered those double-digit receptions this past week, and now with Rashee Rice over 25% of the team's targets, hasn't dipped below a 20% target share in any game without Rashee Rice either. So confident options to continue playing in fantasy. Not only that, but maybe we get Isaiah Pacheco back in a couple weeks. Reportedly, he'll return after the team's bye. But over the last 4 starts, Kareem Hunt has showed enough to where he could also work himself into a timeshare. And clearly, Andy Reid trusts him. Touch counts of 28, 22, 24, and 28 the past 4 games for the Chiefs' backfield and Kareem Hunt. It's been crazy how they use him. And that's the issue with this contest, is that I think it's another one where the Chiefs can not only find success, but that it's another poor spot for Bo Nix. We talked about last week, everyone was excited to start Bo Nix as a QB1 for fantasy, but the Ravens matchup was just not one that it seemed like he could succeed in based on where he's at in his career as a pocket passer. And this is somewhat another one. It's not only Chiefs defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo against a rookie quarterback on the road in Arrowhead, but also now Bo Nix averaging a league worse 4.2 yards per attempt under pressure. And with Chris Jones and everyone about to be in your face, I'm very worried for the Broncos offense, Bo Nix in the passing game here. The only one I will say I have confidence in is Courtland Sutton, because after that Saints game on Thursday night where Sean Payton deliberately jostled around their receivers, gave weird usage to everyone, the last 2 weeks now, we've seen Courtland Sutton pop for box scores of 8 catches for 100 yards and 7 catches for 122. Double-digit targets in both games. So Courtland Sutton is still someone I'm trusting in this otherwise tough spot.
John, let's wrap up episode number 1 of the show that's so nice we do it twice with the Falcons and the Saints, who have a new interim head coach.
And we'll see what Darren Reese does for this offense. But again, right now it's Chris Olave, a terrifying concussion that was all Derek Carr's fault, just leaving his wide receiver out to dry along the sideline. And I don't know if they have anyone to step up in his place. So much so, we saw against the Panthers, Alvin Kamara, 35 touches, 215 yards from scrimmage, now has at least 7 targets in 6 straight games, and that's their offense. Like, yes, Taysom Hill now in his past 3 starts has 23 touches, 15 carries, 6 catches, 2 passes, on 79 snaps, has finished as a top 5 tight end because in fantasy, he has multi-position eligibility in 2 of those 3 games. But again, that's their offense right now. So unless Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who they picked up off waivers, veteran deep wideout, can pick up the playbook in a pinch, I don't know if Mason Tipton, these other guys, are ready to carry Carr in this offense. So really worried about just the whole infrastructure of the Saints offense collapsing here. Whereas even without Drake London, who we'll see if he's playing, got that touchdown on top of Trevon Diggs, fell down hard with a hip injury. After that, everyone else did step up for the Falcons. Darnell Mooney registered a 38% target share with London off the field the rest of the way. Raymond McLeod, his 3 catches and touchdown came over the last 3 quarters without London. And we've also seen Bijan Robinson now pop for 100 yards from scrimmage in 4 consecutive games. 7 receptions in both of his last 2. So the options in fantasy with the Falcons are still very confident in there. And I think it's a game the Falcons can run away with.
7 games down, 7 more to go in episode 2. That's why you got to make sure you're subscribing so you get both, which will drop shortly after midnight. Episode 2, we're all over it next.
Thanks for tuning in to Fantasy Feast. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcasts on your favorite platform.